Hi, Chris Kuzmal here. Last time we set up our enqueue operation, enqueue method to throw an exception when the length that of our queue was greater than or equal to the length of our array, um, and that we would throw a runtime exception with a message queue overflow. In fact, we didn't have an exact match between the message that we specified here and the message we specify. So right here on line 22, we have a message that says queue overflow. And then back in main, we have a check for whether or not the message is queue overflow. You'll notice they do match right now. Well, in the previous video, they didn't match. I think I said in queue overflow and I capitalized overflow in one case and hadn't in the other. So I fixed that off camera. Hopefully you forgive me for not putting that on camera when I did that. So the good news is now we pass, but we presumably only pass when we get the proper exception. So this is good, but I'm a little uneasy. I don't know for sure whether or not this comparison is really right. It definitely gets it for the test case that we had, but what if we didn't overflow? Does this accidentally declare an error early? Maybe this should be greater than rather than greater than or equal to, in other words, this comparison. How do I check that? The good news is I'm going to use the same kind of method as we have had defined for stack, which is the test almost too much in queue. So that's the next test that we need to implement. And the good news is we can just uncomment test almost too much in queue, and we can borrow the test almost too much pushing code. And so we move the commenting off of test almost too much pushing, and now we need to update test almost too much pushing to be test almost too much enqueue. ENQUE. I misspelled it. ENQUEUE. Hopefully that's good. I mean, it's complaining, but that's not a big deal. So I need to make a queue, my queue of dishes again, which is a new queue of size 5. And again, whether I don't want to push things, I want to enqueue. And this time I'm just gonna replicate it 4 more times this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and try to get the indentation right. Oh my gosh, almost got it all right. All right. And then I catch a runtime exception. Now here, it's the same logic. I want to have the same logic as I had up here. I want to have except actually, if I should not get any exception at all. So I don't have to check to see whether I got the proper exception, because if I had an exception, then I get a fail. So any kind of exception that gets thrown should produce an error. So let's see what happens when we run this code. Both test cases pass. So this gives me confidence that in fact my check was right. I would still like to verify that let's see, if our length is, if we prematurely detect the length being too great, then that would be like if length plus 1 was greater than or equal to a dot length. So let's see whether or not we fail one of our test cases now, and we do. It thinks that it overflowed too early, and so if we check for length plus 1 greater than or equal to a dot length, and that shows that indeed this code is probably actually correct. So it was pretty quick to implement the test almost too much enqueue because we borrowed the test almost too much pushing method, and we have already dealt with a more complicated exception situation with the test too much enqueue. So we have a few more tests to implement as listed here, corresponding to these 4 on through line 14. And those should be pretty straightforward. We'll do those the next video.